Welcome to today's AMA. We have innovation in email in the current climate, reaching your client's inbox. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kate, our VP of Deliverability. Kate, how are you doing this afternoon?
Good, good. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you. And also, one of my other favorite employees to work with, my buddy, Mr. Nick Schaefer. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and as always, I'm happy to be one of your favorite coworkers. Done a few
Two,
webinars and AMAs with you now, and I like the sound of it.
two of my favorite people, two of my favorites. Anyway, so we are living in a crazy time right now. So adapting to change is becoming increasingly needful in these current times. So today we want to ensure your emails are landing in the inbox. And that's why we are talking about the art and science of deliverability. If you do have any questions, please save those for the end of the AMA, and we'll be happy to answer them. And without further ado, I would like to pass this over to my presenters. Hope you guys have a great AMA.
So during this pandemic, we have seen a lot of brands, they either have a huge increase in their email sends, and some of them, they have actually had a really sharp decrease in the emails that they are sending. One of the challenges that we are facing now, especially with the restaurants and places start to opening up, are these companies and brands who didn't send much during the quarantine, and now after 90 days they are starting to send traffic, the marketing traffic. So now there's those IPs that they used to send email from, literally they became cold due to lack of activity, except for some of the transactional. So majority of their emails went to almost nothing, no traffic. And now all of a sudden, after 90 days, as the states start opening up, they are sending traffic. And the major ISP that we have seen that starts them failing and not accepting traffic as they used to is Microsoft domains. I have been monitoring our enterprise brands, small and big, and majority of them are doing fine with Gmail, with AOL, Yahoo domains, Verizon Media domains, and the ones that they are struggling are Hotmail. So I would love to hear from the audience that if that has been also your experience, or have you seen any issues with Gmail? It seems Gmail has preserved the previous reputation on the IP and domain, and they didn't penalize these senders for the increase in traffic. So what are your thoughts, Nick? Do you think that the senders at the minimum should start warming up their traffic to Hotmail domains, or Microsoft domains? Would that be the best approach?
Yeah, I think under perfect conditions, stuff like this wouldn't have to. We wouldn't have to do this, but the pandemic has obviously forced a lot of our senders' hands. I think something that is really important that maybe gets overlooked is just working with your team here at Mailgun to let them know what's going on. Are you about to start sending more? That's an important thing, because maybe we can be proactive. But yeah, you asked about my thoughts. You should warm up, just like if you're starting out on a new IP or new domain. You should still do a traditional warm up. As always, start with engaged users that you have in your database. But yeah, treat it somewhat like a regular warm up. It's unfortunate that some companies did have to stop sending for a while. I've seen multiple cases where this has happened. Microsoft, there have been issues there. Gmail, like you mentioned, I haven't seen the same problems, but that's not to say you shouldn't treat them all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So we highly recommend the brands to be more mindful about, because there is also an unusual increase with the traffic coming from health organizations and also given political mailers. So we are seeing a huge increase in COVID-related communications, whether it is from health organizations or actually fishers that they claim to be from healthcare organizations, and also the political, given this year is a really interesting year. Also, we do have an upcoming election, and that has caused an unusual increase in political traffic. And a lot of mailers are, especially in the political fundraising sector, they are seeing temp fails from some of the ISPs, if not all major of them. So my recommendation to political mailers are also be mindful. Like try to reduce your traffic to 1 or 2 email communications a day. Anything over that, given people are so overwhelmed with with like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it is gonna backfire. So that is also my recommendation for the people who have increased traffic during this pandemic, to be also mindful.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with the political centers. We do have an election, coming up soon. So, there's more traffic. There's more messages being sent. Each user's mailbox is probably getting more and more messages these days. So it's important to pay attention, to be cognizant of this. Like this, maybe we're talking about political, but we're also talking about centers in general. User fatigue is something that's real. People can get overwhelmed with receiving too many messages. Sending endless amounts each day may not be a good idea. But you should always keep in mind that we should always be tracking, I guess, the engagement levels. Something that's really helpful is, segmentation. That's something we talk about a lot. Targeting those engaged users. Targeting engaged users is extremely important, and it's something that you can use like in your tool set to kind of beef up your reputation. Those are kind of gold for you as a sender, whatever your business is. You want to have good interaction with the recipients that you're sending to. ISPs will absolutely see that, and they will reward you. Your reputation will build. So it's always important to be cognizant of what your users are doing. Understand how many messages they want to receive each day, each week, each month. That's something that is true for everyone, especially right now with the election year. There's more and more political mailings going out, so those senders should be cognizant. But this isn't something that is only for those senders. So yeah, it's really important to just understand the health of your list, the interaction, and their overall engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. It is interesting that we always touch on authentication and say, oh, this is authentication is a must. And then people are almost tired of hearing about authentication, I guess, because it has been mentioned way too many times. Every single webinar, email marketing webinar you attend, they do touch on authentication. Oh, make sure that your SPF is set up properly. You're signing with DKIM. You have DKIM alignment. Publish a DMARC policy at the minimum quarantine. But I'm an advocate for P = reject. And the most interesting thing is during these difficult times, number one, email has become even more crucial than before. It is the most important tool for people communications, companies communications, organizations, and government to stay connected. And because there is so much critical information needs to be exchanged. So this is a perfect opportunity for criminals to take advantage of this pandemic, but for leveraging email as a tool for their malicious attacks. And that is why you will be surprised. I have seen major brands that they always think, oh, okay, no, everything is set up. we are fine. We are passing on the DMARC, and then you go and look at the headers, and they are failing on SPF. So passing on DMARC is not enough. You have to look and make sure that the SPF is set up properly, DKIM is set up properly. It doesn't hurt to triple check. If you checked it last month, make sure you check it again. Maybe you have new IPs sending on behalf of your domain. Maybe something is off somewhere. Just because you're passing on DMARC, it doesn't mean that you are okay. And it was brought up to my attention this morning by a major ISP. They are going to blog about this soon, this week, maybe even today, that the World Health Organization, WHO, they were not authenticating their traffic at all. I mean, can you imagine during the pandemic, the most prestigious health organization, that they sent email communications to the entire world, they were not authenticating their traffic. This is like, so because of these examples that we are seeing, we highly encourage people to double check, triple check. And according to Mog published a document actually today that my good friend Marcel at Verizon also had a blog post. I highly recommend you guys check out Marcel's blog post with the subject of "We Stand with Mog to Combat Spam During COVID." One of the interesting data that was provided in this blog post by Mog was they are seeing an increase of 14,000 phishing in. Like, this is unbelievable in a matter of weeks. So the coronavirus has caused phishers to really try to find like the weakest link to go ahead and damage the reputation of major organizations such as World Health Organization. So go check your setup, make sure you are signing with DKIM, you have DKIM alignment, SPF is properly set up in DNS, and make sure you choose an ESP who is very proactive in finding these things for you guys. So we at Mailgun went and did like a system-wide audit across all of our customers to make sure everything is set up properly. So I highly recommend other ESPs do the same.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's sad, but you started out by saying, you know, we hear about this all the time, right? Authentication. We talk about it in all the webinars, all the blog posts. But then you hear stories like this where people you wouldn't think have issues with authenticating are, and especially like, you know, at this time, it's really unfortunate for the World Health Organization. But, you know, it just goes to show, like you said, you always need to keep an eye on it. I remember back whenever Mailgun was originally getting DMARC set up, we had stuff that wasn't authenticated properly. And we're an ESP. Like, everyone needs to take a look at their DMARC records. I don't know. I kind of enjoy looking through DMARC reports. I'm kind of a nerd with regards to that. It's probably not everyone's cup of tea, but yeah, it's crazy what you'll see. And, you know, DMARC can pass with only one of SPF or DKIM failing. So just because your messages are passing DMARC doesn't mean everything is in line. So it's definitely, you know, interesting to hear these stories. It's sad, but it's a reminder that you just need to stay on top of this. Something else that comes up. Something else that comes up a lot is, you know, email validation. And right now, especially like with the first example we were talking about, you know, with a major brand having to stop sending for a while because of COVID, you know, email lists could, you know, go bad a little bit over you know, a period of months. I forgot what the number was, but in a recent article I was reading, you know, a high portion of your list could, you know, die off or like go disengaged over the course of a year. So running email validations is something that you can do from time to time, just to kind of keep the health of your list as high as possible. It can prune out bounces, it can prune out other malicious things. We all know that email addresses sometimes get turned into spam traps. So validating your list is something that you can find a lot of value in. And as always, something that I recommend, just because it's what I'm used to, like with the original kind of version of email validation on the Mailgun platform, was adding it to the forms, like on your websites. That's just something that I think is really beneficial. Keeping your list healthy, making sure recipients that are coming into the list are accurate. People make typos all the time. I do all the time. So yeah, email validation is something that you should definitely take a look at too, especially during these times where you may have stopped sending for a while. You need to bring back that list and get everyone back engaged. What are your thoughts? Kate, on email validation?
That is absolutely one of the most important things I recommend to our customers, is definitely take an advantage of our email validation tool. The beauty of this tool is it doesn't necessarily give you, yes, this is a good email address as far as the format, or bad, or this is a missed typos. It actually gives you a score of risk factor. Based on what we are sending billions of messages every day to like thousands of brands. So we do have visibility in our cloud platform that whether or not there has been an engagement with a particular email address across our platform. So based on that information, we assign a risk factor. If we have seen 0 opens and clicks in the past 2 years, we will give it a score of a high risk. So if you see a high risk, the email address could be valid. But if it is a high risk, you should not be sending traffic to it, because there is a high possibility that email address has turned into a trap, or it was a trap to begin with. So somehow this trap, whether it was like a pure mistake, someone mistyped it, or a brand went and rent or buy a list or whatever, take advantage of the validations tools out there. I am not in favor of the ones that they open up an SMTP connection to the ISPs, because that is something that the ISPs do not like. But ours is so sophisticated. It not only checks the format and the mistypo domains, it also gives you a score based on the previous activity, or for each given email address. So absolutely, to summarize what we discussed, during the pandemic, all the brands are affected. Some brands are affected and has caused them in a way that to send more traffic. Some brands had to put a pause on their marketing traffic. If you are part of the ones that had to pause traffic due to pandemic because your store was closed, or you have a restaurant, or like you are a ride-sharing app, people are taking less and less rides these days, or you are in the hospitality industry, hotels and airlines. So you definitely, it did affected you. If you're having less guests, you will be sending less, and now things are sort of opening up based on the stage that you are in. So be mindful of that. Restart the ramp up, especially for your Microsoft domains. Start slowly. At the minimum, spread the traffic in 1 week. The second recommendation is authentication. Don't just think, oh, we should find. We haven't seen an issue. If you haven't seen an issue, it doesn't mean everything is fine. Go double check, triple check. Check all of the authentications, check headers. And of course, use validation tools that they are out in the market, and make sure that your list is clean. And you also mentioned, Nick, segmenting your traffic for the brands that they are sending more, which is a fantastic idea. I love that, especially for the political senders. I mean, separate your fundraising traffic from your newsletters, because you probably are having a higher ROI for the fundraising traffic. So if you mix all of that, you may get temp failed or blocked because of like an increase in traffic. So try to send it from different IPs and domains and subdomains. That is our recommendations for the brands that they are sending more these days.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's kind of the topics that we were going to discuss. But being the nature of this is an AMA. I think we've had some questions coming in. I just started looking through them. One of the first ones that came up is, how critical is segmentation in a time like this? You were kind of just talking about this, Kate, but I'll add on to it. With one of the examples that we were talking about initially, we saw that a customer was being temp failed by Microsoft. If you are segmenting and you have a list of engaged users, like I mentioned during like the warm-up part, like starting with those engaged users is so important at all times. But right now, it's even more important. So the question goes back to how critical is it? It's super important right now because like there's people that took a break from sending and now are sending again, and they've been extremely legitimate senders all along, but they're having issues. So you need to get started out basically on the right foot.
Perfect. I'm going through questions. We have a question. I've already sent one COVID-19 email since the beginning of the crisis. What is the best way for my business to stay engaged with my customers? That's a great question. If you have done, because of the pandemic, you have not, you need to reduce your volume. It doesn't say during this question that whether or not you had to stop traffic because of COVID. So you have sent only one at the beginning and your IPs have been called since then. If that is the case, I would recommend to send at least one email a week just to stay engaged with your base. Do not go cold for like 90 days. I wouldn't recommend sending every day, but one email a week. Just if let's say if you are a retail, tell them about like the curbside pickups or online, any specials that you are running online, or how the consumers can get in touch with you. If, for example, you are a bank, a lot of things are now done through the app, mobile apps. So just provide them with information about how your business is impacted and how your consumers can get in touch with you. And if that requires them for like a physical presence into your stores, what to expect when things are opening up. So my recommendations, do not go to zero, at least send one email a week to your user base.
Yeah, you mentioned something that made me kind of chuckle. The curbside pickup. I don't know about y'all, but my family has been wearing out HEB and Walmart. Like we just use the curbside pickup like so many times. I think probably a couple times a week at this point. But it makes sense. Like tailor your message to what's going on right now. That's really valuable. The curbside pickup. That's what people want to read about. They want to know how to go pick up their groceries or whatever they're getting. So yeah, that was a good point and definitely something my family can relate to. Then the next question we have is, after how many days should you remove an unengaged recipient? That's a really good question and one that I actually like. It's not an easy question, but whenever I talk about sunset policies, it's all about understanding your particular user base. What makes sense for one sender doesn't make sense for another sender. Some senders may get away with sending, a couple messages a day. Maybe it's like a coupon service or like Groupon or something like that, where you send more frequently. Mm-hmm. Your sunset policy is going to be far less than someone that sends like a monthly newsletter. You have a little more mm-hmm. leeway whenever you're sending less frequently. So that's my stance on it. It's all dependent, and I know it's not a direct answer, but it's all dependent on your user base. Understanding, at what point do you start seeing patterns of users becoming disengaged or fatigued from the messages you're receiving, and start there.
That is exactly my recommendation. It really depends on what type of a business you have. I would say any type of, so 6 months has become like, I would recommend like, do not email anyone more than 6 months with no opens and clicks in 6 months, maximum of 12 months, but definitely do not send any traffic to anyone over 12 months inactive, like no engagement. At the minimum, segment them out. So you can send like re-engagement campaign at some point. But yeah, I agree with what Nick said. There's no like magic number that we could recommend.
Unfortunately, there's not.
Next question is how.
You can go ahead and go. Sorry for the lag there.
No worries. I was gonna go to the next question. Is there anything else you wanted to add to the previous one?
No.
Okay. Yeah, there's like a slight delay with our video. The next question is, how can you test for spam traps? Basic email validation doesn't seem to verify that, only that the email exists or not. That is true with traditional email validation tools, but our Mailgun email validation smart module is very different than the rest of the solutions in the market. And we do have customers actually who are using other platforms and they use our validation module because it does give a risk factor score based on engagements that we have seen for a particular email address. So we are sending emails on behalf of like banks, retailers, like ride sharings, hotels, airlines. So we do have a wide variety of customers, and the chances that a particular email address is part of any one of these brands is very high. So based on what we have seen among other brands, we would assign a score. So if the score is high risk, as I mentioned earlier during our chat, it means that this email address has not seen activity in the past, I don't know, definitely over 12 months. So if you plan to send to it, you are at a great risk. But yeah, the traditional ones in the market, they just check for whether or not the email is valid as far as like the format, like if there's an @ sign or a .com or whatever, or if there's a mistypo. Our solution is the only solution in the market that assigns a risk factor based on engagement. So if you haven't given our validation module a try, I highly recommend it. Try it and see it for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Give it a shot. And the thing with it is that we're not like our validation tool, like Kate was talking about, it's like a risk assessment. Should you send to this address or not? It's not gonna be clear, or it's not gonna say this is a spam trap or this is so-and-so or anything. Like it's going to do a risk, should you send to it or not, and it will have different levels, low, medium, high, do not send, things of that nature. So I know that might be confusing. It's like, oh, they're doing an email validation. The thing I like to say about spam traps is that there's not any like one email validation company will ever be able to get rid of all the spam traps. It's just not reality. But if you're doing an analysis and taking different things into account to come up with a risk assessment, you're probably getting rid of some of the spam traps. You shouldn't have those in your list, but the validation will help to get rid of some of the dirt.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
All right. Let's see another question. How do I restart my reputation? Should I change my IP address only and start from there? Or should I change my message or change my subdomain as well? Or is that not necessary? The way I would address this is honestly, like, I wouldn't change a whole lot. The important part is, like we were talking about with the segmentation, targeting those engaged users when you're starting back up. ISPs really don't like to see a lot of change. They're going to see that as like kind of a red flag or something starting new. So they're going to look at it more hesitantly. Whereas if you built the reputation on something previously, you probably have a little more grace in as long as you're starting up slow. Like we said, don't just open the floodgates. But you should be able to restart or rebuild your reputation fairly quickly if you start with the right list. And again, segmentation, really important there.
Yeah, that would be also my recommendation. Don't keep changing because you become like, look like more like a spammer that they jump IP space or domain space. Stay with whatever domain or IP you have. Restart your traffic with the most engaged, which is 0 to 30 days, or based on your business. If you send email once a month, maybe you can expand it to the first 90 days. And then as soon as like things are improving, then you can widen that engagement window from like, let's say 90 days to 6 months and maybe even 12 months. But I am not a huge fan of people who change everything and want to restart fresh, because keep in mind, major ISPs, they have already seen the content from you. So by doing all of those things, like by changing IP and subdomain, you are making yourself more suspicious, versus by starting fresh, ramping up slowly, sending to the most engaged and sending relevant content. Don't over message, no matter who you are. Even if it is like 2 weeks prior to the election day and you are a political mate, do not over message. That is gonna backfire. So keep the same IPs, try to restart reputation of what the existing setup. And another question came in. We are just beginning to think about reaching out to a list of about 6,000. It's a good list, but old. How many would you recommend we send per day? So when you say, I'm not quite sure what you mean by it's a good list. Good list meaning at some point in the past, this list was collected based on an opt-in permission and somehow you did not send traffic to this list. Again, it is important to know how old is the list. Is it like 5 years old, or is it like 2 years old, or is it like 1 year old? The duration of inactivity on this 6,000 email addresses is very, very important. If it is over like 4 or 5 years old, I would recommend don't risk doing it. If it is within a year or two, try to use a different IP and subdomain for this re-engagement and send something really attractive to the base based on whatever brand that you have. Try to send something valuable. Make sure that you are very, very clear in your subject line about the brand name. So like the brand is clear, your from address is clear, so people know exactly who is the email from, and then try to provide something attractive. If you can provide an attractive coupon for people to re-engage and click, if you can provide some interesting update about your business, that would be very, very useful. So again, you have mentioned the list is old but good. The old that you haven't mentioned how old, so that also plays a major factor. But yeah, start from a different set of IPs and subdomains for the re-engagement campaign. So what are your thoughts, Nick, regarding this?
This question comes up a lot.
You're on mute.
I mean, am I on mute, or is it just the delay?
Yeah, no, I can hear you now. It's just the delay.
Okay, yeah. So something that comes up quite a bit during these discussions. It's a question that comes up a lot, but we get this question and people want like, okay, send to 5,000, send to 10,000. Like they want an answer like that, but a lot of it depends on the distribution of your list as well. You can have a list that's made up of 100,000 users that's all Gmail, or all another ISP, or heavily weighted towards one ISP. That warm up is going to look a lot different than if the list was more evenly distributed. So that's something that there's a lot of variables that come into play whenever we answer questions like this. Kate mentioned the list, like how old is the list? There's a lot of questions we just have to make sure that we understand about the sending to give the best guidance in these situations.
Excellent. Well, thank you. There are more questions coming in. Is the reputation on the domain level or subdomain? Oh, is the reputation on the domain level or subdomain level? Example, at support.companyname or at companyname.com? That is an excellent question. So there is, I would say, if you are we highly recommend segment your traffic on different subdomains. Each of those subdomains, for example, welcome.companyname.com carries a different reputation from transaction.companyname.com or newsletter.companyname.com or updates at companyname.com. So all of these, updates. Each of these subdomains carry an individual reputation, especially at Gmail. Gmail assigned a different and independent reputation to each subdomain. If you haven't segmented on subdomain, then they will fall back on the organizational domain. But if you have already are a smart sender and have segment your traffic based on different subdomains, that is what is the most important. Organizational domain carries some reputation. Let's say you're Expedia.com. Expedia is a well-known brand. So if you haven't segmented your traffic as Expedia, the fallback is at the organizational domains. At different ISPs are acting differently. In Europe, it's not as clear as that. So the European European ISPs, they probably look equally at the organizational domain and different subdomains off of that organizational domains. But if your list is heavy on Gmail, we highly recommend to segment based on different subdomains, as each subdomain carries its own reputation. Nick, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to kind of just echo some of the things that you were saying. They are seen as independent kind of signals. There's a lot of different signals that ISPs are tracking. Domains and subdomains is one of those. But one thing to remember, though, is just because you are segmenting doesn't mean you can like run wild on one subdomain and think that it's not going to affect the other subdomains or primary domain. There's going to be bleed over between things. There's always going to be ways that ISPs can basically tie different signals together. So don't try to like outsmart the systems. They're really advanced, and follow best practices. Do your job as a sender, and shouldn't run into any problems. But yeah, things are seen independently.
Well, everyone, thank you guys so much for your time today. If you have any, excuse me, if you happen to have any more questions for us, you can reach us at mailgun.com. Also, check out our resources at mailgun.com/blog. Lots of great stuff on there about deliverability, about our new features, about the new bulk validation feature we've got, VTO, all these great things, inbox placements, all these great deliverability tools and things that can definitely help you with the art and science of deliverability. Nick and Kate, guys, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having
us. It was
us.
a pleasure.
And this will be sent out after the AMA and be able to be viewed. And if anyone has any other topics for AMAs, please reach out to us. You can email me, thomas@mailgun.com. Happy to take those in. Guys, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you guys so much for joining us.